So it's going to be sort of a three-part talk. The first part, I'll tell you exactly how the book got published. Then I'll talk about my motivation of how I came to write it. And then I'll kind of give you a little, like, what I call my little movie trailer, where you can kind of get some insight into some of the stuff that takes place in the book, hopefully without giving away too much of it. So, but that's the cover I designed. And basically what happened was it was a grief therapy exercise for me when my two boys went into care. And I spent 20 years really writing it, because I don't know if anyone's ever tried to write a book. It's hard. So I would write a little bit and then stop and go back to it and stop and go back to it and stop. But at some point it became, in my mind, a finished product. I learned later after we went through the editing process, it was far from a finished product. But anyway, at age 60, I said, well, I wrote this to honor the guys, and what's the point of me passing away or something no one ever gets to see it? You know, you got to put it out there. And even though I didn't think it had any commercial appeal, I felt like I needed to get off my computer. So as Michael alluded to, I blog a little bit. I had a little blog called Merrill.com. I still have it. I just haven't written on it very long, in a while. And that's kind of got a purpose too. With my boys being low functioning in terms of that they can't read or write or talk, I don't know how much of what they're getting or what they're learning, but I have very much hope and faith that someday through God's grace and medical science, they may become more proficient. And I might not be here when that happens. So I wanted to leave some breadcrumbs for them so they kind of see what their dad was like. And that really was what motivated the blog. So I started putting the book on there a chapter at a time. And I get on Facebook and Instagram. I say, hey, I put a chapter of the book out there. And just kind of kept my fingers crossed that no one would think it was terrible. And lo and behold, people were reading it and seemed to enjoy it. And they kept asking me, where's the book? Where's the book? And I said, well, you're getting the book. You're getting it for free. I don't know. Well, as Providence would have it, serendipity occurred, and I was touring the Louisiana Association for the Blind. If anyone's ever been around that facility, it's amazing. It's one of the most remarkable places I've ever been. And Libby Murphy, who's the retiring CEO, is a dear, dear friend. And I saw where they had a publishing, or not publishing, but a printing division. So I just made a casual offhand remark. I said, look, I wrote a little book. I said, it's not for commercial appeal. I said, I just wrote it for me, and I'd like to maybe print it, though. Do you think y'all could do that? She goes, well, we do mainly manuals, like for how-to and stuff, but we've done some family histories. Yeah, we could take a shot at it. So I told them what I wanted the cover to look like, and they worked that up, and I thought it was really cool. And then, they were going through the reading and editing, and then all of a sudden they called me into a meeting, and I thought, oh, boy, they've decided they really can't do it, and they want to let me down easy. And instead they said, oh, no, we want to publish you. We want to create a whole new division of the company, and we want you to be our first novel and our first author and all that. And I'm like, well, okay, why not? So we kind of went along for the ride, and they started doing promotional materials. And again, more Providence. I was in Rhino Coffee, and two friends of mine were sitting there next to me, and one had read the book and said, don't you know that columnist that writes about books? Don't you know Judy Christie? Yeah, I know Judy. Well, you got to tell her about this book. So all of a sudden, Judy Christie writes an article about me in the Shreveport Times. And then I get a phone call from the Louisiana Book Festival that I've been picked to be a featured author and be a panelist and go to Baton Rouge, and 20,000 people show up there, and I'm going to have a book signing. I'm like, wow. And then COVID hit and everything just went kaput. I had a book signing set for Red River Brew Pub, and people were coming from New Orleans and everything. The whole thing just ground to a halt. So I thought, well, that's about par for my life. You get going and something comes out of nowhere. But we kind of stayed the course. But as COVID went on and on and on, they finally came to me and said, look, we've got to return to our core business model. We're not going to be able to do this for you anymore. And I said, well, I understand that. And by then, I already had an ebook put up on Amazon. So I was set up on Amazon. So I called my buddy and I said, look, I need to put this book on Amazon. He goes, well, I got an editor. She's really good. Let her polish and clean it up, and we'll get it on there for you. And you'll be in Ingram, and bookstores will be able to buy it. So that's kind of where I am now. And I absolutely being on Amazon has been fortunate, because now it's easier to find. It was hard to find when it was with LAB. Their website wasn't really set up to drive traffic to it. And I'm able to offer it at a more affordable price. So it's lingering. It keeps staying around, and I'm getting reviews. Right now I've got 30 5-star reviews and 1 4-star review. So, And if y'all see Sanders Hearn, thank him for the 4-star review. So, but anyway, he even emailed me, goes, this is a great book. I said, will you write a review? Sure. 4-star. Man, we're friends, man, you know. So anyway, so that's kind of how the book got published. So how did I come to really get motivated to write it? Well, that's a little deeper dive. It starts with this guy. That's my dad. That's about 2 months before he passed away. He was someone that I just adored. I think he's one of the most fascinating, interesting people I ever met in my life. He grew up in a town called Appleton, Wisconsin. Appleton, Wisconsin is in the middle of the Fox Valley. It's a paper mill kind of town. It's 30 miles from Green Bay, so they're all Packer backers up there. I have like 38 first cousins because he was one of 9 that survived. And believe me, I gave them the business after our first week of the NFL when the Saints won. That was a lot of fun. But he had wanderlust, and he clashed with his father, who was a carpenter and who was later going into the home building business. And my dad, at age 17, asked to join the Merchant Marines. He wanted to join the Merchant Marines, and he had to have his parents sign permission to do that. So my grandmother was not in favor of that, but my grandfather said, let him go. And so off he went. And wartime. I mean, World War II, he's out there and U-boats and other thing. And I think this is where information gets kind of anecdotal, because apparently he was sunk. Either in the North Sea or the Caribbean. I'm not sure which, but I want to say the Caribbean because there was a lot of U-boat activity in the Caribbean, and also he had scarring from his back from being in the sun for an extended period of time, which would have happened on a life raft. So he had some real-world experiences, but at the same time, he's visiting all these amazing places, you know, Rotterdam, Marseille, Shanghai. And again, anecdotal, I'm getting this, you know, from him. I was still quite young when I was hearing all of this. And when you're on a ship at that point in time, and at least in that era, there weren't a lot of recreational opportunities when you weren't working. You either played cards or you read books. Well, my dad read books. So while he didn't have a college degree, he had a worldview degree from all the books he read and all the places. Because I grew up in a port city, and I can tell you, interesting people hang out in port cities. So when you're going to all that, and later through the help of the internet and Ancestry.com, I was able to give him even more information on him. That he'd been through the Marshall Islands, that he'd been through Seattle, that he'd been through the Panama Canal, that he'd been to New York. All this in a very brief period of time. So after the war was over, he stayed in that line of work. He stayed as a merchant seaman. He ends up in New Orleans, living in New Orleans. And he meets my mother. And they fall in love, and he was my mother's third husband by the time they got married. And all her husbands were from the Midwest. So apparently, either New Orleans guys wouldn't date her, or they were afraid of my 3 Italian uncles. So I don't know. But anyway, they ended up getting married, and my dad's commitment to her was so profound and strong that he gave up the sea. And he went to work for Kaiser Aluminum. And again, they moved him around. He ended up in West Virginia, working in Ravenswood, West Virginia, helping start a plant. And that's a very rural part of West Virginia. Ravenswood and Point Pleasant. In fact, Point Pleasant is a sign of a famous Indian battle with Daniel Boone. I wasn't aware of that until I read Daniel Boone's life story. And there's apparently some kind of monument there. But not a lot of what I'd say available housing to rent. And you certainly don't want to buy housing there if you're only going to be there for a short period of time. So everyone got trailers. So I might be the only person who's a member of the Shreveport Club that has on his birth certificate place of residence trailer park. But with that said, that's where I was conceived. I ended up going across the Ohio River into Ohio to be born because there was no hospitals. So then I'm now a Midwestern birth. So there's a lot of Midwestern stuff going on here. But my mom wasn't going to let me stay in West Virginia. I was baptized in New Orleans. I was always going home to New Orleans. I have no memory of that. And by the time I was 2, we had moved back. Oh, awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. So anyway, so my dad now is working for Kaiser Aluminum. And again, he gets transferred to India. And I couldn't take the inoculations. I was having a lot. I was a baby. I was having a lot of adverse side effects. And so my mom says, we're not going. We're not signing any waivers. You go. So my dad was gone for 18 months. When he got off the plane, he had lost maybe 80 pounds or something like that. And I recognized him from a distance. My mother did not. And apparently, I can remember this, I broke away from her and was running to him on the tarmac because I knew it was my dad. And she's screaming, come back, come back. And then, my dad leans down and picks me up. I mean, I remember all this so vividly. But he had developed COPD. He smoked, as a lot of people did in that time. But he also inhaled a lot of toxins in that aluminum plant. I mean, just a lot. So he became a very sick person, and I had childhood asthma. So my mom had a perpetual problem with people in her household trying to breathe all the time. I mean, we were always having different attacks. But my dad had this worldview, and he very much wanted me to have a worldview. He felt there was so much out there. And, he'd lived in India. He had been all over Europe. He had been to Asia. He had lived in the Midwest. He lived in the South. And he wanted me to have this worldview. So an opportunity to go to Germany presented itself, and he wanted to go. And my mother absolutely did not want to go because she knew he was very sick. And so basically he used me as an intervention to say, tell your mom you want to go to Germany. I said, okay, Dad. So I go to Mom, I want to go to Germany. And, she knew he had put him up to it, but she acquiesced. And we went over there, and then he got assigned to go work briefly in Anglesey, Wales, where it's very damp, very cold, and he developed pneumonia. So now they're building a plant, and he's very ill, and he can't go to work. And the bosses there basically said, look, you're here to work, and you're sick. Do we need to send you home? And my dad, said absolutely not. So he got and went to work, and then he came home that night, had a very severe attack, and it caused a heart issue, and he passed away. And I found him. So, my mother found him first. She was screaming. I went down there. I found him. We had a guy installing a television to get us Dutch TV so we could have English-speaking television to watch, because none of us had mastered German yet. And I called him down because he spoke English. I had the presence of mind as an 11-year-old to scream for him to come down, and he called the ambulance. But by then it was too late. So now we're being whisked home, and my mother's a career homemaker, and she's got an 11-year-old to raise. And it really left me adrift. I mean, as an 11-year-old boy, that's the time you need your dad. A lot of changes are going on with you. You got a lot of questions. Not necessarily comfortable talking to your mom about all this stuff. You need your dad. I didn't have a dad. And it really kind of, I kept looking for substitute dads, coaches, whatever, and I never quite found anyone that measured up to him because he was absolutely everything to me. I remember when I was playing Pee Wee football, and I was a very clumsy kid. I hadn't morphed into that super basketball state champion guy yet. I was still a clumsy second-string defensive tackle at the age of 8. And this kid across from me is giving me the business. I mean, he is whipping me down. And his father standing next to my dad and actually reported to my dad. My dad was his boss. And he's saying, yeah, oh, man, geez, Merrill, look at your kid. He's kind of getting the business here. And he's just, and I felt so bad that I was letting my dad down. I could hear all this. And then my dad said something. He just said, he goes, I know my son's doing his best. And as long as he's doing his best, that's all I can ask for. And to this day, when I think about that, I get jacked up. I mean, yeah, he was born in 1925, so he'd probably be in his early 90s maybe. But so at that point, I mean, that guy was toast. I mean, I blew him off the line. I knocked him back into the quarterback. At one point, the coaches had to pull me off of him because I was lifting him up and slamming him back down on the turf. And I looked at my dad, and my dad just kind of winked at me, and the other guy's dad was gone. He left. So he was just this very interesting person, and he always talked to me like a peer. I mean, he was my dad, but he never disrespected me. He made me feel intelligent, and he knew exactly what to say to me. I remember I had this very difficult, profound discussion with him. We were in Wisconsin visiting my grandmother, and the Saints, we had just acquired the Saints, and I looked at him, of course, my dad, he's a lifelong Packer guy. And I said, Dad, I got to talk to you about something. He goes, what is it? I said, I'm a Saints fan. And he goes, so am I. Just totally left me off the hook. I mean, he grew 20 feet in that one moment. I thought he was going to give me a hard time. I knew he wouldn't. Most adults wouldn't. I'm 8 years old. I don't know what he's going to tell me. I mean, he was just my everything. So he's gone. But what it did, as I progressed in my life, it made me discover what I wanted to be. Most people, they have goals, aspirations. They want to be an engineer. They want to be an astronaut. They want to be a pro football player. From that moment on, I wanted to dedicate myself. I wanted to be a dad. I was going to have sons. I was going to recreate everything that I had done with my dad that had gotten cut short. The last thing we did together before we went to Germany, he gave me a choice. Do you want to watch the Saints play the Lions in preseason, or do you want to go to Chicago and watch a baseball game? We're going to see the Saints. We went to Tulane Stadium, him and I. I mean, that was what was going to happen. So it happened for me. I was able to become a dad. And I didn't get just one, I got two. And the interesting story about how MC got to be named, my senior year in high school, as I alluded to, I played basketball, and I wanted to dedicate that year to my dad's memory. So my dad used to sign all his correspondence MC. So I decided that I would be announced in the starting lineup. Rather than be announced as Merrill, I'd be announced as MC. So, plus the New Orleans Jazz, which was our pro basketball team at that time, had this shutdown defender named E.C. Coleman, and we prided ourselves on playing good defense. So I had kind of a double thing going on there. MC to honor my dad, MC because I was a great defender. And we won the state championship. So at that point, said, if I ever have a son, I'm going to name him Merrill III after my dad. I'm going to call him MC, which my wife at the time agreed to until we realized we were going to have a son. She goes, wait a minute, we got to talk about this. Oh, no. And so we had MC. And actually, before he was born, I had this dream. It was a very vivid dream. And I was chasing this little blonde-haired boy like in a fog. And my dad was sitting in his easy chair. And I said, boy, Dad, I said, this kid's really hard to handle. I said, I guess I was a challenging kid as well. And he goes, son, I wouldn't have traded our time for anything in the world. He goes, that's a great boy, and you're going to be a great dad. And I'm convinced it was him. I mean, it was so real and vivid, I can't imagine anything else. Before Andrew was born, I had another dream. Two boys sitting in a glass-enclosed building that was very noisy and cacophonous. And we had no food in front of us, but it was a restaurant of some kind. And I went and said, we're having another boy. And years later, on a trip to Disney World in Epcot, we walked into this glass-enclosed restaurant, sat down, and my wife went off to get the food, and I looked across the room at those two boys, and I said, oh my gosh, deja vu. This is it again. I mean, it was just amazing. So I got these two boys, and the thing with autism is that you don't know you have a child with autism until they're around 2, and they start missing milestones. So at this point, we kind of know MC's autistic. We're not sure about Andrew. But as you can see, I had these two guys, and I was prepared to, have every experience with them that I had with my dad. That was going to be, my goal. And I had been practicing to be a dad, coaching. I gravitated to coaching. That's dad practice. When I was at Country Day, I used to spend time with the younger guys that were on the JV and the 8th grade team, showing them drills and stuff. It wasn't coaching, it was dad practice. All the time I spent with my basketball players, dad practice. I was practicing to be a dad. I wasn't aware of it. It was just here, but that's what that was all about. That's why I did all that. Well, as it turned out, their condition was pretty bad, pretty profound. We're talking behaviors, self-injury, tantruming. We'd have one downstairs banging his head on the wall, another one would be upstairs, getting undressed and doing other, things with, toileting and things. I mean, I used to call our house Motel 6 because there was always a light on. And we were being exhausted. We moved to St. Tammany Parish to avail ourselves to what we felt was the best school system in the state. And it's an extremely good school system, but they just weren't equipped to handle what we had. And I got to credit my ex-wife on this one. She's the one that said they need a more structured environment. And so the first place we ended up going was St. Mary's. And I was dead set against it. I'm a solution-driven person. I do not fail at things. We can make this work. But she says, and she knew how to trick me. She said, think about it that we're only going to try it for a year. And if it doesn't get better or it doesn't work, then we can always bring them home. I said, okay, I can do that. And then I thought about it some more. I said, okay, This isn't a care facility. This is a boarding school. This is a very elite and exclusive boarding school. You've got to have a certain IQ to get in. They don't take just anybody. So, I said, if I was talking to typical parents, I would say, sir, your children wouldn't qualify to go to that school. My kids do, your kids don't. So I was able to get my mind around that what I was doing was what in their best interest and what I should be doing as a parent. Not necessarily what was best for me, but what was best for them. They were at St. Mary's for 17 years, and then Andrew started having issues that St. Mary's felt like they couldn't take on at the time. And then again, by the grace of God, Holy Angels stepped up. And this is really another miracle thing, because I had known of Holy Angels ever since I moved up here. I always felt it was for higher functioning, residents, more Down syndrome and things of that nature. I had served on their board for 1.5 years while on the board of St. Mary's. I was chairman of the board of St. Mary's for 3 years and on their board for 15. And I just felt like, we visited many times and it wasn't necessarily going to be a good fit. But I got on my knees and I prayed to St. Joseph. I said, look, you were our Lord and Savior's foster father. I'm giving you my son. I said, I can't, you need to take him. And I woke up and I felt like I needed to go to Holy Angels. And they have a waiting list a mile long, okay? But we got there and found out they had pivoted more to autism, that because my son was self-injurious but not aggressive to others, that they could work with him, and they had 2 openings. What are the odds of that? What are the odds of that? So now that's where they are, and we couldn't be happier, and now we're all in the same town. And then again, why did I go to Shreveport to go to college? Why did I end up moving back here to build a career? It's all part, to me, it's part of a plan. It's a path I'm walking. Whether I understand or not, or it's pleasant, it's still a path. So there's how old they were when they went in. And look at them. When they're not the most adorable guys you've ever seen, they wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, I'm telling you, looks can be deceiving. They just had incredible issues, obsessive compulsive behaviors, all kinds of difficult things. That's what my youngest son would do when he would come home on a visit. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. He would spend all day piling stuff on the bed. When we'd take turns, one would go get him, one would go. For 8 years, every other weekend, we would drive to Alexandria on Friday and back, and then drive back to Alexandria and back on a Sunday. When we moved to Shreveport, we cut that drive in half, and we saw them every week. And now that they're here, I can see them whenever I want to. But that's what we were dealing with.
So nothing except before, or he was like piling?
Just like piling.
Wow.
And and even more impressive is that his poor mother would go in the bathroom and scream, Andrew, because there'd be no toilet paper in there, okay? You'd take it never that. I mean, things came from everywhere.
Right.
He did like Diet Coke, pretzels, and an apple. He liked that combination. I mean, that's some of the stuff we were dealing with. I mean, and it goes even beyond that, but that's kind of because this is the bad stuff. This is the hard stuff. He would take his knee and drive it into his head. He actually would punch himself in the face. That's not nearly as bad as what we saw not too long ago, about 2 years ago, when he got into it really bad. He also had seizures. He's got scoliosis. He's 6'3" with scoliosis, and I always think God's got a sense of humor, because what do you give a basketball coach? If he had a straight spine, he'd be 6'5". That's a basketball player, I'm telling you. But I mean, they're wonderful kids. Throughout all that, they still maintain some very incredible core values. They don't judge people. They don't care about material things. They take joy in the simplest of pleasures. He loves to take car rides. He just loves to be driven around and see things. And all MC wants to do is, I call MC in Angel Works. He doesn't really work. I think he's upper management. He just walks around and watches other people work. But that was part of the challenge, was trying to get them to the point where they weren't doing this to each other, or to themselves rather, not to each other. So how did I become a writer? Well, that's me. I was a stringer for the Times-Picayune as a 16-year-old. A girl I went to high school with, her dad was a sports columnist, and they needed someone to go cover the private school games that the regular reporters wouldn't cover. So I would go keep all the stats, call in the stats, they'd write a story from it. That press pass got me into everything except the Superdome. I was a credentialed journalist at that point. So that was a really cool time. And I guess the only fun thing I can remember about it is there was a little high school down there called Lutheran High. And I had to cover them. They were playing a little school called Fisher. And they dropped back and they threw a ball and it went to the ground and the receiver hit him at his feet. And so he walked away. And the Boothville kid picks it up and runs in for a touchdown because the ref said it was a lateral. So now the coach, these guys are clever. They went to Valparaiso. They're smart guys. They decided to make that into a play. So now they throw the ball the next week, and I'm covering that game. It bounces in the ground. The guy picks it up. He takes 2 steps. A wide receiver streaking down the sideline. He's wide open. He overthrows him. Next week, they're playing my high school. So I went to my coach and said, look, coach, they got this play. And I told them all about it. So about midway through the second quarter, they're losing pretty bad. Guy drops down, throws the ball on the ground. Guy picks it up, 10 guys hit him. just blow him up. It would have been 11, except the other guy knocked the receiver out of bounds on the other side. And the coach walks up to my coach and goes, God, you guys are so well coached. He goes, they sniffed out our trick play. And then he looks at me and goes, wait, you're that sports writer guy. And I had my Country Day pin on. He goes, you go to school here? But it was a great experience. And I did develop a love of writing. I was a sports editor for my high school paper. I was sports editor for the Centenary Conglomerate. And I really thought I might go into that. I didn't know if I was going to go into college coaching or journalism, but somehow I ended up migrating into banking. I don't remember quite how that was. And that's my blog. Again, I started writing just slices of life, breadcrumbs for the boys in case they ever became self-aware. And that's really where the book got its start, because I was able to find a mechanism which to get it into print. And so, again, why did I have a blog? If I had not done a blog, I would have no way of getting that book out there to where I even wanted to get it published. So again, it's about being on a path. But now that you understand the motivation, because what I really wanted to do was, in my grief, I wanted to write a story that honored my boys. But I didn't want it to be something where, oh, I'm this special needs parent, and I've been so, this is so hard, and we do so good, and please, think about it. That's not me. I love my guys just the way they are. I think they're extraordinary. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take what I thought were their extraordinary traits, the ability to endure discomfort. And Andrew Wautlet can endure discomfort. He pulled his baby teeth out early. If he got a staple, in his head, he would take it out. He broke his collarbone and did not make a sound. The other thing was they were very coordinated kids, very agile. We had a trampoline out there. No one said, you're crazy to have a trampoline. They'll fall off and break their necks and everything. My guys never fell off the trampoline. They'd run around in circles. They'd jump and land on their feet. I'm out there shooting them with the hose. Got the water spraying on them and everything. And my wife goes, you're going to kill them. I said, no, they're having a good time. And they did. They never fell. They were always just very agile. Andrew climbed some stairs, and he would get down as a 2-year-old and slide down the stairs with his leg as a rudder and then stop himself and then walk on the floor. But he climbed up the banister one time, and he got on the edge of it. So he's standing on the banister, and the whole stairwell is behind him, and he's reaching up to try to touch a ceiling fan. Now, I know you think I'm a bad dad because I didn't see that right away, but I had the other one doing something else, and all of a sudden I look up, I went, and I didn't want to scream at him because then I'd make him fall. He hits it with his fingers, and it startles him, and he falls, and in midair, he turns around and lands on all fours. So I'm looking, and I think, God, that's just amazing. And the focus, if they put their mind to something, there was no stopping it. At this point, they're on it. You're going to do this. They're not going to be deterred. Nothing's going to stop them. It's just complete, total drill down. We're going to make this happen. So I thought these were extraordinary things about them. Plus, they never judged individuals. They didn't care about whether they slept in a fancy bed or just a regular bed. I felt they had the most amazing priorities of anybody I ever met, whether it was by product of the disability or not. I thought, I'm supposed to be their role model. They're mine. If someone goes and says, oh, you're a goofy kid or whatever, that's your problem. They just walked off. They didn't give a darn. Or that would have made me inflamed. I mean, I thought, God, they have so much more going for them than I do. And so a lot of times when I get in a tight spot and I'm thinking about something, I thought, well, what would the guys do? How would they react to that? I mean, they really have been, I just admired them. So I decided to write this story that took all these, what I thought were great qualities, and turned into like an adventure. And so I thought, what do you enjoy, Merrill? Well, I like espionage, and I like chases, and I like a little duking it out stuff. So I created this character where it's a young boy, and he's got some very severe disabilities. I mean, he's nonverbal, he's self-injurious, he's got seizures. I mean, he's got a lot of problems, but he's extraordinarily gifted and agile. And so where he's discovered is in this church. And this is a real church. It's the church I got married in, St. Francis de Sales Church in Houma. And I took some liberties with the interior to make Andrew, go in there and do something extraordinary. But that's where they can see what he can do. I'm trying not to give too much of the book away, but that's where he's seen. Well, it turns out one of the people in attendance at the wedding is a cousin who is in some sort of covert operations. No one really knows what he does. My ex-wife really had a cousin that lived in the Beltway, and no one knew what he did, so they all said, well, he must be a spy of some kind. So I took that and I ran with it. I said, okay, I'm going to take that cousin, but he's going to be my antagonist. So he sees what this young boy can do, and in his warped mind, he sees an application for that, for what he can do with what he's trusted to do, which is basically capture information on terrorists without leaving a blood trail. So they kidnap him to train him to be a thief. So this is his mother, and that's his real life mother. I got permission from his real life mother to use that photo. But this is his mother, and she's got a very prominent role in the book because she's the reason that he wants to go home. He sees a map while on an assignment that has push pins in it, and it reminds him of one his mother had showed him, which says, this is where we live, this is where we live. And he remembers that, and he says, in his mind, I'm going home. Now, the only problem is he's 900 miles away from home. He can't read or write, he can't talk, and he has no money. So he's got a problem, but he's not going to let that stop him. Again, the focus. But that's who he wants to go see. And the reality is that of my two boys, the oldest one's more mine. The youngest one is definitely hers. The youngest one loves me if she's not around. If she's around, I could burst into flames. He'd walk right by me. So, so he loves his mother. So he's going home to his mother. This is my antagonist. Now, you might recognize that man. That's Stephen Merchant, the actor. And I hope Stephen Merchant doesn't mind me borrowing his image. Hopefully he'll take it as a compliment. I've seen him act. He's a comedian, but he's also a dramatic actor. And he perfectly captured what I was looking for in the villain, the size, the length, and everything. And this guy's an interesting character because he's kind of devoid of emotion in the beginning of the book, but as the book progresses, he becomes more and more unhinged as things go wrong, as he loses control of the situation. And at the end, he becomes a very, very, very dangerous person. So this is where he was headquartered, and I wanted to capture an image because Washington fascinates me because no building can be taller than the Washington Monument. So they don't really have a skyline there. It's much smaller buildings. So I just wanted to kind of give people an idea of what that looks like, because a lot of times people, even if they've been to Washington, in their mind when they leave, they might think, oh, it's like every other big city. It's not. It's very, very different in terms of you can't have a building taller than the monument. That's the protagonist. That's the rat. And it's interesting, if you remember the cover, he's got a hood on. When we first did the cover, I said, why do we have that hood on? I said, we shouldn't have that. That would just get in the way. And then I remembered him and his brother, whenever they wore hoodie shirts, they always put their hood on. I realized it was a calming thing. So I said, that's genius. I'm going to leave that in there. So in his suit that he wears to carry out his missions, there's a hood on it, and it's on the cover, and I left it there. He is lining up Skittles. He used to line them up as Mickey Mouse heads. We used to go to Disney World every year. It was one of the few places that we could feel, I guess, typical as parents. Unfortunately, we had a lot of adventures there. MC, for example, when we were on the ferry boat, decided that no lady was allowed to have her legs crossed. And he got away from his mom, and he walked down the aisle and uncrossed ladies' legs, okay? Andrew decided while walking in Disney World that he could walk head first into people, and they would have to move. So he would just walk into people, you know. We got on a ride called the Carousel Progress. Now, he's fearless. MC, not so much. MC doesn't even like to go upstairs. I could throw him out of an airplane. He'd be fine. So he thinks every ride's a thrill ride. So we get on this Carousel Progress. I don't know if people know what that is, but it's sort of an animatronic thing. It's very slow with slow-moving characters. I knew he was going to hate it, but he dragged me on there. And once again, I'm not going to fight him on this. Well, midway through, he loses it. He can't stand it. He wants off. We can't get off. I reach around him. I'm whispering in his ear, come on, buddy. It's going to be over in a little bit. I told you this wasn't a fun ride. He takes his head and bangs me in the face with it. So the ride ends. We go walking off, and this young couple holding hands comes over and looks at me. And she goes, sir, you're bleeding. And I said, that Carousel Progress was a rough ride. Then he led me to It's a Small World. Now, again, he likes to line things up. Nothing is more lined up than It's a Small World. Everything's in a line. Everything's like this. And that incessant music. We rode that 11 times in a row. In a row. There was not enough alcohol in Epcot or anywhere else in my room to get me over that. So all these rides have been, all these episodes have been adventures, and he's more the aristocrat. He's the guy that sits in the back with his legs crossed, with his hands folded. MC's more the encounter group guy. He'll walk up and hug people. He's all jovial, you know, and stuff like that. We got on the mummy's tomb, and he's got his hands over his ears because he's noise sensitive, and the lady walks up and goes, son, are you afraid? He goes, I said, ma'am, he's autistic. We've been on this ride 3 times. I got him covered. She goes, son, are you afraid? And he looks at her, and he juts his jaw, and he goes, woo! I said, you hear that noise? That means all hell's about to break loose. I said, if you don't start that ride right now, everyone's going to wish they were somewhere else. And she does this, all right? We went to the Hoop-de-Doo Review. My oldest son is a cowboy. He should have been raised in Arkansas. He loves hee-haw. He loves anything, you know. I mean, he just loves all that stuff. So he's having a big time. And my other one is sitting there in absolute abject disgust. He cannot stand what's going on. He's looking at these people like they're from Mars. And he stands up and throws his napkin down and storms out. And these people are like, you know, like, so very interesting traveling with these guys. MC, we were at Kentucky Fried Chicken. He made us wolf down our food, and then we got in the car, and he goes, Mimi Mouse? I said, yeah, Mimi Mouse. 10 seconds later, Mimi Mouse? Yeah, Mimi Mouse. Mimi Mouse? I ignored him. He grabbed my food. Mimi Mouse? This went on for 4 hours. I finally said, can you sub for me, Jennifer, and say Mimi Mouse? So it's fun, but it's challenging. This is where he's on assignment, and this is very similar to a house that I stayed in with my cousin who was living in Oak Park. So the book starts in Oak Park. They're in the Chicago area. And so a lot of the initial action takes place in that setting. So this is a good visual of what he was doing, but he kind of gets in through the side. He gets into this room. He sees the map. He abandons his mission. All of a sudden now they got a problem. Or as they say in the book, the rat is out the cage. That was his code word. And the reason his code name was the rat, and this is a true story, is because in the book, he would take food and hide in his room. The real-life rat took fig Newtons and other things and would hide them in his room. And my ex-wife goes, he's like a little rat. And so that's how I came up with the name for the book and for the code name, his code name, which was the rat. Of course, that's the infamous map that he saw, and the push pin is not quite where it needs to be, but it's close enough. Both boys were born at Southern Baptist Hospital. They're the second most famous brothers to be born there. The first most famous brothers are the Manning kids. But my boys were born there too. So that's the map that prompted him to want to leave and depart and go on his mission, to go home. He thinks in images. Autistic kids tend to think in images. They don't think in words. So he's got a catalog in his head. And what he knows is that mom's a school teacher, dad's a banker. I want to go find my mom. How do I go find my mom? I got to find a school or a bank. This is his thought process. So he finds a school and decides to hang out there. Unfortunately, it's spring break, and there aren't those schools aren't open. But he gets lucky. There's a teacher in there cleaning her classroom, and her name is Doris Plaisance. Now, That's Carmen Jogo, and I hope Carmen Jogo doesn't mind me taking her image. I hope she views it as a compliment. But Doris Plaisance in the book is actually from Louisiana. She had some tragedy in her life. Her marriage fell apart. Her son passed away. Her brother had died and left her a brownstone in Chicago, and she decides to build a new life in Oak Park. And all of a sudden, this child appears in her window in a black suit, and she's like, what do I do? And she figures out through his behavior that he's autistic, and then some guys come looking, and she realizes she's in danger, and now all of a sudden she's along for the ride. And that's how he's got someone to navigate his trip. He's convinced someone through his actions and through showing that map and everything else, and her seeing what was going on, that she's going to help him. But she's going to need some help too. So they got to go on the subway. They've had a lot of adventures. I'm cutting to the chase. They've had a lot of near misses. They've had a lot happen this time, but now they're running for their lives. They don't have a car. They can't get on a plane because he doesn't have an ID. So they got to get out of town. So they're going to get on the subway. And this is the real life subway. And I've actually ridden this subway from this station. And they have more action on this subway. Some very, very serious things go on that subway. They're always getting into trouble, and they always manage to get their way out. This is a stop, and I wanted this to be the stop because I love that sign. It's an iconic. I love State and Lake. I like the Chicago Theater. I hate to see when Shreveport lost our little Chicago Theater sign. But now they're in town, and they're running off the train, and they're continuing to be on the move. But they're going to take the bus. So but the problem is they can't wait a long time for a bus. And when they get in there, the next bus to New Orleans is a long time. So she decides she's going to take the closest bus to the closest southern city to get as far as they can get. So they book a trip to Memphis. But she finds one of these. They still exist. In fact, I saw one at the Arizona Diamondbacks baseball field last week. So I know they're still out there. She has to get help, though, because once they get off that bus in a strange town, they're stranded. So she calls this guy. Now, you might recognize it as Idris Elba. And Idris Elba, I hope he doesn't mind I used his image. One of the reasons that Doris and Jerome are African Americans is because the primary caregivers of my sons throughout their time at St. Mary's and Holy Angels have been people of color. And they've showed them nothing but love and tenderness. So I wanted to honor them too. So I felt it was very important that I make two of my main characters people of color because of what they've meant to me in terms of raising my children and doing the hard things, dealing with some of the issues that my sons can handle. This guy's got problems too. He was kind of a bad boy. They met in high school. She was a good girl, a straight A student. He was kind of the bad guy on campus. The unlikely love affair. They get married. They end up having she goes to college. He goes to work. They have a child. The child dies of cancer. He starts drinking. They separate. He never stops loving her, though. And so when she calls him, he's ready to answer the bell. He's not in the best of shape to answer the bell, but he's going to answer the bell, and he's going to come. So now they're on the bus. So now it's like planes, trains, and automobiles, but it's not a comedy. It's they're running for their lives. They're going to go on I-55. That's the straight shot up there, and that's a very desolate highway. A lot can happen on that highway. And so these guys that are trying to get them continue thinking of ways to intercept them, and they're trying to keep a lid on things too. They don't want the general public to get an idea of what's going on, even though there's now a trail of collateral damage that Andre's leaving behind. And I'm not even discussing all the things he can do, but he's an extremely well-trained young man who does things that people can't expect he will do. He catches everyone by surprise, and he's also doing something. He's making independent decisions. He's not just following the strict routine anymore, and that's got them befuddled. My sons do make independent decisions, and I've watched them do critical thinking, so I know it's possible. So again, I'm embellishing a little bit, but I'm not departing too far from where I think their real skill sets are. So now they've got another plan. They're going to intercept that bus. But as all the other plans that have happened, it didn't work. And that very helicopter becomes, instead of becoming an agent of capture, becomes an agent of escape. And now they finally make it to Memphis. And that's Mud Island. I don't know if anyone's been to that attraction. It's a cute little thing in Memphis. I've actually been there. I found my street in New Orleans. I put my finger down and pointed to it. But again, Andre thinks he's home, and he's not, and he has a problem. And she has to explain to him, God, we're close, hang in there. So now they're on the run again. So now they're going to another bus station. And at this point in time, Jerome is there. He's waiting. But now the whole world knows about him. They've pulled out. They've just unleashed it. And they're accusing Doris of being a kidnapper because her son died around the same time Andre was first missing. So they're trying to make her the bad guy so they can apprehend them. I mean, this is really getting crazy. So meantime, our evil guy has been called back in. Okay, he's failed a bunch of times, and they're putting him on a jet to take him back, to get him out of the scene. But as evil guys do, they find a way to turn the tables. And again, this guy's morphing into something really bad. And he ends up he ends up getting a hold of that jet somehow. And now he's heading, it's a race to where Andre lives. They're racing to get home. This is where he goes in there and basically commandeers a truck and a few other things and does some pretty bad things to the people there. And now he's got a way to beat Andre to Andre's house. So now they got another problem because they know people are looking for them. And they're trying to think of a way they can get undetected. So they come up with this plan. And I'm not going to get into all the plan is, but they decide that no one's going to suspect them of crossing the causeway backwards. Instead of going straight to St. Tammany through I-12, they're going to loop around. So they got to cross a 24-mile bridge with nothing but water around it. How many people have driven that causeway? I've driven it more times than I can shake a stick to it. It's a long drive. And you've got a guy driving that's been on fumes. He's going through alcohol withdrawal. He's going without any sleep. So, of course, meanwhile, our antagonist is hanging out at that hospital, which is not far from where Andre lives. That's a real hospital, and that's really where I used to live. And so he's drinking coffee, and watching the news, waiting for clues. But eventually he starts to make his way, to Andre's house. However, again, another problem. They get stopped by the police, and then once again, Andre displays extraordinary skill sets that they don't know he has, and he eludes capture again, and now everything takes place there. That's where it all ends up, which is a real picture of my first house I ever owned in Mandeville. Just to show you, that's Andrew, and that's him not happy. So if you wanted to know if someone like him could get focused and mad and could inflict some damage to you, right there you can see, hey, Dad, you didn't do what I wanted. But again, part of my goal as a dad is I wanted to experience some of the things that I didn't experience, that I lost out with my dad. Going to football games and going to baseball games and, going to parades and things like that. And I thought all of that was going to be lost on me. And, well, as I discovered, you pray in your time and God answers in his. So what happened was, as you can see, that's Disney World, and that's taking the same areas. We started to hit some milestones, and guess what? Everything I thought that I wouldn't be able to do, I actually was able to pull it off. We did go to a baseball game, and that was a fun trip. Everyone in the stands were like high-fiving him and rubbing his head, and he grabbed some guy's Coke because he doesn't understand boundaries like that. And I said, you can't have that MC, that's someone else's Coke. And the guy goes, let him have it. I said, okay. But the spookiest thing was at Oakland Athletic, Alex Bregman from LSU hit a home run. We're LSU fans. I thought, okay, that's cool. But then a guy from Oakland Athletics hit a home run. I looked up his stats. It was only his 9th home run of the year, and this is late in the season. He's not known for hitting home runs. His name was Matt Joyce. His mama's name was Joyce. When my mother died, he was very close to my mother. We went to her apartment, and we thought we had cleaned everything out. And I thought he was going to have a hard time seeing all that. He used to be very obese, and she would give him candy, but only selectively, and she'd hide it so he wouldn't know where it was, or he'd eat the whole bag. When we walk in that apartment, and he starts going, Mama, 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 and he starts to cry. He can't find his mama. Then all of a sudden he looks up, cocks his head, stops crying, walks over to some cabinet, digs in it, pulls out a bag of Tootsie Pops, takes one Tootsie Pop, puts the bag back, never asks for her again. I don't have explanation for that. The Saints game was awesome. He put his earplugs in because there's noise in there. We beat the Jets. The only problem we had is when the Jets did score once, he did stand up, and I said, we don't do that. And that's Andrew and I at the Independence Bowl. We've been to Mudbug hockey games. We go to Centenary basketball games, and if the little birdie I hear in the ether is true and Centenary brings back football, I will definitely have season tickets for me and the dudes. So it's been a great journey. It's still going on, but and the book, is still selling and still doing things. But anyway, that's basically it. And if anyone wants a book, they're already signed. If anyone did want a book, I'd be happy to personalize it for you. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.